Hi, this is Richard Riehle. You may recognize me from Star Trek Next Generation as Batai, Star Trek Voyager as Seamus, and Star Trek Enterprise as Dr. Jeremy Lucas. And you are listening to Trek Untold.
Hello and welcome to Trek Untold, the Star Trek podcast that goes beyond the stars. I'm your host, Matthew Kaplowitz. One of the joys I get from doing the show is being able to chat with character actors whose faces I always know and recognize, but whose names I may not actually be aware of until recently. Not everybody can be the star of the show, and those main eventers need talent around them to play off of and oftentimes elevate them. Rarely do these performers get the accolades they've earned for decades of work, so one of the goals of this podcast has been to put a name to the face and help my audience appreciate all of their efforts. After all, I can't be the only person to become excited when I see one of those people show up on screen, and then immediately be bothered that I don't know their names. What makes it even better is when one of those actors also happens to be part of the Star Trek franchise, and today's guest has plenty of that on their resume too, because we are speaking with Richard Riehle. Richard is a highly prolific character actor who has appeared in over 400 shows and films, not counting his numerous theatrical roles as well. So this is the official record now for guests on Trek Untold. He's appeared in 3 different Star Trek franchises in a total of 5 episodes. His first appearance was in Star Trek The Next Generation as Batai from the beloved episode The Inner Light. He followed that up a few years later on Star Trek Voyager as Seamus, a member of the community from a fictitious holographic Irish town in the 6 season episodes Fairhaven and Spirit Folk. His final appearances in the franchise took place in Star Trek Enterprise, in 2 Season 4 episodes, Cold Station 12 and the Augments, where he played Dr. Jeremy Lucas, where he spends the majority of that episode being tortured by Brent Spiner. I think for some Trekkies that might be a dream come true, but for most of us out there, maybe something better just watched on television and not partaking in. Beyond Star Trek, you would recognize Richard for his roles in shows and films like Falcon Crest, Quantum Leap, The Ferris Bueller TV Show, Fried Green Tomatoes, Glory, Murder, She Wrote, Free Willy, The Fugitive, Office Space, Casino, Ally McBeal, The Practice, Lethal Weapon 4, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Diagnosis Murder, Grounded for Life, The Hebrew Hammer, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, Poor Paul, Avatar The Legend of Korra, Blackish, Axe Cop, and a whole lot more. I could spend literally 2 hours probably just listing all of his things and still not get through every single role he had. And best of all, plenty of those roles were shared on the screen with Star Trek alumni, so we'll hear some stories about all those fine folks today too. There's a lot to discuss in this episode, and we cover a lot of ground in this very in-depth interview, so get ready to learn just a little bit about the amazing life and the extraordinary career of Richard Riehle. But before we jump into our interview, I want to ask you, are you following Trek Untold on social media? It's the best way to keep up to date on who's going to be the next guest on Trek Untold and to learn all about the other cool things that are happening here. So if you're on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter, go ahead and look up Trek Untold, all one word, and give us a follow and a like. If you'd like to help support the show monetarily, go ahead and check out teespring.com/stores/TrekUntold to check out some of the merchandise we have available. This includes t-shirts, mugs, phone cases, sweatshirts, stickers, and a whole bunch more. So go ahead and check out teespring.com/stores/TrekUntold. You can also support our show by visiting patreon.com/TrekUntold. If you become a paid subscriber to Trek Untold, you'll get first access to the show and a chance to ask our guests questions on future episodes. But most of all, please subscribe to the show wherever you're listening to it or watching it. And if you've already done that, please also leave a review and a rating if you can. Leaving ratings and reviews helps increase the visibility of podcasts on platforms like iTunes and other places like it. It shows that you're listening and that you like it, and that other people who are interested in the same subject are going to probably like it too. It helps us grow, it helps us get better guests, and it helps us keep bringing this amazing Trek Untold show to you. If you're already following us or have supported us in any other way, thank you, of course, for being a part of the Trek Untold family. There's a lot of Star Trek podcasts out there, and we're very grateful that you chose us to listen to. I'd also like to make a quick shout out to our friends at Triple Fiction Productions, who make some great 3D printed Star Trek inspired toys and replicas for fans of all ages and toys of all sizes. But you'll hear more about them a little later on in the show. Now, without further ado, let's beam up this week's guest. Computer, access interview file. And welcome back to Trek Untold. And now joining us on the other side of the line, we're joined by a character actor who truly is the definition of character actor. He has been in over 400 different things. I don't even think I could count that high. That's a record for this show, in fact. We're joined today by Mr. Richard Riehle. Richard, how are you?
I'm great, Matthew. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. You know, one of the things we like to do on this show is we like to spotlight the character actors, and I can't think of anybody better than that because, again, just looking at the resume, that's insane. I mean, I have a question I like to ask folks when we first start these interviews, but I got to ask you first. I mean, how the heck does someone get into 400 things?
You say yes a lot. No, I've been really fortunate. It wasn't anything I really expected, and I spent, I don't know, 15, 20 years doing theater all around the country and then in New York for a while, and came out here in 1989, I think, out to L.A., and I got a couple of films and got a series, the Ferris Bueller series, and then just things did a number of auditions, and people became acquainted with me and my work, and eventually I got to do all of these wonderful projects. I mean, it's amazing. There's been so few that I've said no to because they all have something that is interesting in them and something that drew me to the project.
Yeah, that says a lot about the power of saying yes, and we've heard that a lot from other guests on the show, not just for roles they've been in, but for advisors or folks who would give them a lot of great wisdom and insight. It's the power of saying yes is quite a tool.
I think it is, yes.
So, Richard, let me ask you the first formal question for this interview. What is the earliest memory you have of Star Trek?
Oh gosh. When I was in grad school at the University of Minnesota, this would have been in the late '60s. There was a bar at a place called the Five Corners over near where the theater department was there, and a lot of us would stop by there for a drink around 5 o'clock or so after classes were over, and it was a real mixed crowd. It was workers from the area and students and what have you, and it was early at that time for bars to have TVs in them, and this one had a television set in it, and every night at between 5 and 6 there was the classic Star Trek was playing on it, and people would rush up to see the project and to see what the show was and comment about it.
I've never heard of a bar showing Star Trek before. That sounds pretty surreal today's day and age.
Oh, it was very surreal. In fact, some athletes used to come in, and I remember there was one afternoon where Alan Page and Carl Ehlers from the Vikings came in, and had sat down and watched. It was great.
So I'd like to get a little bit of background information about you, Richard, and I'd like to ask where you grew up, what your parents did for a living, and what little Richard wanted to be when he grew up.
Oh gosh, well, I grew up in a little town in Wisconsin called Menominee Falls. My dad was the assistant postmaster there, and my mother was a nurse when she wasn't raising 7 kids, and it was great because it was a small town. There were people. You were out on the street all the time. Everybody looked out for everybody else, and there was like I don't know, 50 or 60 kids just lived on that one block, and all went to the same school, and had pickup games of baseball and football and whatnot, and I don't know what it changed all the time what I wanted to be. The usual fireman, policeman. I never thought about being an actor. I guess that's the key to it. I spent all my spare time doing in athletics. I played every sport that they would let me, and had a great time doing that. And even when I went to college, I went in as an engineering major, and very quickly found that I didn't have aptitude for that. And then I was but I was taking a German class, and my professor was the head of the department. He said, "Well, are you in the sophomore year abroad program?" And I said I could be. So you have to be a German major. I said, "Sounds fine." So I was a German major for a year, and spent a year in Austria, and then I came back and realized that wasn't something that I was going to be able to do for the rest of my life, and got a job, a work-study job with the psych department. And so I thought, well, this looks like an interesting thing, and of course it wasn't. I ended up running rats for the whole year, and then was just essentially looking for a way to get out of college. I couldn't stay there any longer. It was I couldn't afford it, and it was obvious that I wasn't accomplishing anything there. So a friend of mine who I'd been in Austria with was a theater major. He said, "Well, you can take all the crud you need in speech and drama in one semester." And I said, "Sounds like a great idea." So that's what I did.
And you did that at Notre Dame, right?
Yes, that was at Notre Dame.
Okay, go Fighting Irish.
Yeah, absolutely. They got a chance this year. I don't know. I got my fingers crossed.
So, yeah, you went to Notre Dame. We mentioned your grad school. Can you tell us, I guess, an important lesson that you learned during your time in school when you're first studying acting, something that's kind of stuck with you, or even better, we always love hearing embarrassing stories about early days of acting, but anything you remember from your early education in theater?
Oh, yeah. It was because I was taking all those credits in one semester, and because it was a small department there, I think there were six of us seniors when I graduated. You did everything, and I think that was the biggest lesson that I learned is that know what everybody's job is and what they have to do, and then you can be supportive and know where to go for help as well. During that semester, I acted, I directed, I built sets, I sewed costumes, and stage managed, and that was a wonderful experience. So when I got out of Notre Dame, I graduated in January. I didn't really I hadn't made any plans about going to grad school or anything at that point, and went back to my summer job, which was unloading and treating railroad ties. And it's okay in the summer. It's hot and smelly, but in the winter it's terrible. And so I was looking for an indoor job, and I read in the paper that they were looking for apprentices at the Milwaukee Rep, and I thought, well, here I just spent, I just graduated with this degree. Maybe I can do something with it, and ended up just doing like 3 or 4 shows there as an assistant stage manager and a stage hand and whatnot, and evidently it made enough of an impression that they were willing to offer me tentatively a job as an assistant stage manager the following year. But fortunately, I guess fortunately for me, at Notre Dame they were anxiously trying to figure out what they could do with this student that had disappeared in the middle of the year, and they got me into the University of Minnesota, where I did an MFA in acting and directing, and that was my work study job there was running the scene shop. I mean, I was not running it, but I was the teaching assistant that was there to make sure that everybody did the job and didn't get killed, and then I saw that since I was spending so much time in the scene shop, I decided, well, I'd explore this acting and directing stuff a little more, and began doing that, and in the 2 years I was there, I ended up doing quite a few roles. And actually got to audition for the Guthrie, which was wonderful. I did a show with their second season. I mean, their second theater group before I left. We did a production of 3 Sisters, and that was very exciting. And then my advisor at the university was. Used to work at the Meadowbrook Theater in Michigan, and he would spend 6 months each year at the university and 6 months at the Meadowbrook. And so he said, "Why don't you come to Michigan, and between stage managing and acting, I'm sure we can find stuff for you to do there. So that sort of just snowballed that way. And again, it was I was essentially, everything I owned was in the back, packed in my car, so I could go anywhere to where a job was available.
So how did you go from the world of theater into Hollywood and doing films and TV?
The first film I did was Rooster Cogburn and the Lady. It was shooting in Oregon on the Rogue River, and I was at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival doing a season there, which was just about to end. And one of the guys that was at the Medford newspaper mentioned to me that they were looking for people to be in this movie that they were shooting with John Wayne and Katharine Hepburn up the road on the Road River, and so he gave me all the information he had, and I called and went up there and left off a picture and resume and met some of the casting people, and then I got a call. Could I come up and work on this film? And it was I was essentially a glorified extra and stand-in for Richard Jordan. But it was great. I had no experience at all with film prior to that, and it was amazing to again see how to kind of be a fly in the wall and watch how everything was done, and there were and this was a big budget project, so there was lots of there were lots of things to learn and lots of things to see, and then after that I went back mainly to doing theater, but would occasionally pick up a job in the towns where I was doing theater. I did a TV show called The Other Side of Hell that we shot in Anaconda, Montana, while I was working in Seattle. I did a little American International picture called Joyride while I was while I was working in Seattle another time, which was shot in and around the state of Washington, and so I began to build a little bit of a resume, but it was always just sort of a secondary job where I was working, and but then I ended up getting cast in a Broadway show, The Execution of Justice, and went to New York. And while I was in New York, I got an agent. Up until then, I'd never had an agent before, and they began sending me out for soap operas and movies that were shooting in New York and things like that. And I had done while I was in New York, I had done Glory. And so when it opened in '89, I think it was December of '89, my agent said, "You should go out to L.A. and our L.A. office will see about setting you up for auditions once the movie opens." So I did that, and got cast in this Ferris Bueller series while I was out here, and I went back to New York to do the remodel of a play that I had done before, and then came back in 1990 and began doing auditions for whatever they could get me in for. And so I had and the thing was, when I went to LA the second time in 1990, they said, "Okay, you got to promise that you aren't going to do theater for 5 years, so that because it seems like every time we send you out for something, you've got a theater show lined up, or there's somebody wants you to do, and then you're unavailable, and we need you to be." And so I did that. It was not easy, because that had been what I'd been doing all my life up till then, and not knowing, I had always kind of tried to plan ahead a little bit, and not knowing from day to day essentially what you'd be doing was a little nerve-wracking, but it worked out okay.
I would say so. And
Yeah.
just take a quick step back here. We talked about Rooster Cogburn, and we're talking here about John Wayne, Katharine Hepburn, Richard Jordan, like you said. Joyride's got Desi Arnaz Jr., Robert Carradine, Melanie Griffith, and Glory. Again, Matthew Broderick, Denzel, Morgan Freeman, Bob
Oh
Gunton,
yeah.
favored my show. So, especially in this early time in your career, you're around a lot of very well-known, very famous A-list actors. Were you at any point starstruck with anybody, or in those films or any other movies? Have you ever been starstruck on a set?
Well, sure. I mean, I remember all of those people were, of course, way beyond me. Except for Bob, because I actually had done theater with Bob in New York, but and that was great. And the thing is that all of them, it's almost a cliche, but that the bigger they are, the nicer they are, the more willing they are to share what you have. You don't bother them, but you can. There are always moments where you're sitting around waiting for the next scene to be set up, with that, and if you're there, you often include it in the conversation, which is really helpful. I think the most starstruck I was probably was in Casino. I got cast in Casino, and I suddenly I'm on this set with Martin Scorsese and Joe Pesci and Robert De Niro and Sharon Stone, and they're waiting for the light. It's a 270 degrees of windows on this set, and the light has to be right for them to do it. And as soon as the light's right, you just have to go. And everybody's kind of chatting away and looking, and the DP is checking to see when the clouds are gonna move, and suddenly it's go, and then you go, and then you get as many takes in as you can until the light changes, and then you wait again, and for the at the first moment, getting set up, and sitting on the couch there with Joe and watching everybody preparing and doing their work. It was very nerve wracking. But at the same time, once we did it, once we did a couple of takes, it was obvious that all they were interested in was making the best possible film they could, getting the best possible shots they can to make the movie work. And I like to say, essentially, they were putting their trousers on one leg at a time, like everybody else, and it made it a little bit easier that way, But yeah, I mean, these guys all knew their job so well, and were so expert in doing it. It was great to be the fly on the wall to watch how everything was done.
And what a great scene, too, in Casino with Robert and Joe, De Niro and Joe Pesci. Like, that's a wonderful scene you guys have. What was it like to share the screen with them?
They were great. I mean, it was funny because I had worked with both of them before on tiny little things. I did a Player. I think there's a Player. I can't remember. It's terrible. I can't remember the title anymore. With where De Niro plays a knife salesman. And I was the last guy that he was going to try and sell his knives to, and by now he's gone slightly off the deep end, and he's shaving his leg with his knife, but he was great. He was so funny and so right there with it. Joe, I had spent about a month with Joe on this movie called about Ouija called Public Eye, and I was this cop that kept showing up at all the places where Ouija was taking these photos, and we shot it in Cincinnati and in Chicago and in Visalia. The opening scene of the film we shot in like 6 different places, and it was and again Joe is very open and very very much trying to get everybody involved in the process, and it was wonderful working with him. So we're sitting on the couch, and we get we eventually get the master that they want, And Joe, nudges me and he says, now look, Bobby's going to have to ask he's got to ask the script supervisor what he did in this take, because he does everything he just allows everything to come out when he's doing it, and then, but as soon as she tells him what, he'll do exactly the same thing each time, and he's great at that. And that way, it was wonderful to look at the scene through those eyes, as well, to see what that process was.
I think this is the most important question I'm going to have in this entire interview today. But when did the mustache become a permanent fixture on Richard Riehle's headshot?
It was a very strange thing that happened. I had the mustache. I've been doing a play at the Yale Rep called Moon Over Miami, and I had the mustache for the character there, and so I still had it when I came to L.A. And when I auditioned for Ferris Bueller, they wanted the mustache. So I had it for the half a year or we shot the 13 episodes of Ferris Bueller that we did. We were shooting Ferris Bueller right on the Paramount lot in a sound stage next to where they were shooting Star Trek Next Generation. And so I would run into these people all the time, and they said, "Oh, come over here and do an episode of Next Generation." I said, "I'd love to." He said, "But you can't have that mustache if you're doing Next Generation." I said, "Yeah." They said, "Yeah, the Mike Westmoreland, who's the makeup guy, has got total control over what your face looks like." And I said, "It's fine. It came on and off when I was doing theater all the time from show to show." And so okay, so they canceled Ferris Bueller, and I got an audition a couple weeks later for Next Generation, and I went in, did the audition, and after the audition, they said, "Would you be willing to shave your mustache?" And I said, "Yeah." So I got cast. I did it. It was Inner Light. Played Batai, and then while I was doing it, I had an audition for Free Willy, and I got cast in that. So I didn't have the mustache when I was doing Free Willy. So we were gone for 13 weeks in Mexico and Oregon and Seattle and up in the San Juan Islands, and I came back and still didn't have the mustache and started auditioning, and where I had been fairly successful in the auditions before that, nothing was coming through. So after a couple of weeks, my agent started calling around to the various casting people. He says, "Is there a problem?" They said, No, we love Richard. We just don't know how to use him without his mustache." So I grew it back, and I've had it ever since.
So I didn't know there was a connection to Star Trek with the mustache, so how about that?
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, since you brought up Inner Light, too, let's talk a little bit about that. I mean, we've got a lot of other things to discuss here. There's so much because, again, your resume is so big. I don't even know where to begin or where to end this thing. But on the topic of Inner Light, had you auditioned for Star Trek previously?
No, that was my first audition for Star Trek.
That's pretty rare for a lot of folks when we talk to them about their Trek appearances. Oftentimes they'll say they've auditioned again and again and again, and it's taken years before they get the role, but you nailed it first try. That's impressive.
Yeah, well, I think I knew. I mean, I had become acquainted with a lot of those people because we were working right next to each other for 6 months, so that may have been part of it. But yeah, it was I was surprised, but happy about it as well.
This episode is a very, very beloved part of Next Generation. It's a lot of people's favorite of all time. When you first read the script, when you first got it in your hands, what did you think of it?
I loved it because it offers Patrick the chance to kind of live a whole life as somebody else, and the being part of that world was very exciting because it was a world that was dying and everybody was trying to figure out how they were going to find a future of some kind. It's a beautifully written script too. I mean, I don't know. There's something very special about it, and even as an actor in it, I felt that. And Patrick, he worked literally night and day. We would wrap at 8 or 9 o'clock at night on a shooting day, and then the AD would come up to him and say, "Okay, Patrick, we'll get you out of makeup and we'll have you home in an hour, get something to eat, because we're going to pick you up at 5:30 tomorrow morning to start over again." And he was very excited about it, because I think, I mean, he said for often that this was one of his favorite episodes, and I think part of it was his son playing his son. I think that meant a lot to him too. And but it was very, again, this is this sort of, sitting around talking between setups. There were a number of times when we would be waiting for the next scene to be set up, and Patrick would say something about theater, and it became apparent that both of us had spent a lot of time in theater, had done and seen a lot of stuff, and so we ended up having some really wonderful conversations between takes, and that was exciting.
Without looking ahead to the other series, because we're going to discuss Voyager and Enterprise in a little bit. For this first time you did Star Trek: Next Generation, did you get a chance to interact or meet with any of the other stars in the show?
No, because I was in that other world.
Right.
So Patrick was the only one that was in both worlds.
I gotta tell you too, most Star Trek guests when they come on the show, like they're usually in some crazy alien makeup or they're in a Starfleet uniform. This time around, Batai is basically wearing pajamas. That must have been like such an easy day in wardrobe.
It was a very easy day in wardrobe, and that was the thing that Bob Blackman, who was the costume designer, I'd worked with him for years at Ashland before, at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival before, and so that was nice to run into him again there on the Star Trek set.
Do you remember watching the episode back when it aired, or do you typically watch any of the stuff that you do back on TV or in movies when it airs? I
do watch. I like to watch what I'm doing. In those days, it was hard to watch because I had, I was so unused to it. I didn't watch it when it aired because I was doing something else. And in those days I didn't have. In fact, I still don't have, the ability to tape it and watch it later. But I did see. I've seen it several times since then, and it's marvelous. And that whole the recorder thing at the end that Patrick has, that was totally, he wanted something there, and then it became iconic. And it lives through like into the movies afterwards.
Yeah, there's even an action figure that comes with that little flute, if you can believe it.
Oh my gosh, I didn't know that.
Trek Untold will return momentarily. Trek Untold is brought to you by Triple Fiction Productions. If you're a Star Trek cosplayer looking for props or toy collector looking to spice up your shelves, Triple Fiction Productions has you covered. Triple Fiction Productions produces affordable and unique 3D printed Trek-inspired products from the original series, Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Enterprise, and the movies. You can expect the same amount of care and attention to detail in any of the items in their catalog, whether it's a prop replica for use in a fan film, or a part of a cosplay, or accessories and playsets for figures from Playmates, Migos, or Diamond Select. Own your very own tricorder or phaser rifle with working lights, the bridge of the Enterprise E for your Playmates figures, or any other item from countless species and ships from the Star Trek universe. All products are 3D printed in the USA and are constantly evolving and improving based on fan feedback. To learn more about their products, visit them at triple-fictionproductions.net or on Facebook at facebook.com/triplefictionproductions. Triple Fiction Productions, taking Star Trek where no 3D printer has gone before.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Frakes. If you're of a certain age, you may remember me as Commander Riker from Star Trek The Next Generation. And my wonderful brother Daniel died with pancreatic cancer 24 years ago. They opened him up, they diagnosed, they said, "You've got 6 months to live." And that was it. He died 4 months later. And at that time, there was a 3% survival rate. Since then, we've grown to the embarrassingly high number of 10%. But a dear friend of mine, and probably all of yours, Kitty Swink, is one of those 10%. She has survived pancreatic cancer for 17 going on 18 years. Pancreatic cancer is the third leading cause of cancer-related deaths in the United States, with a 5-year survival rate. That's just 10%. And more than 60,000 Americans are estimated to be diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in 2021. More than 48,000 will die from the disease. Because symptoms are often vague and can be hard to detect. That's why I'm supporting the Pancreatic Cancer Action Network, the leading patient advocacy organization committed to fighting the world's toughest cancer. PanCan is working hard to create outcomes for this devastating disease through its groundbreaking research in early detection and better treatment options. PanCan drives progress by funding life-saving research, providing personalized patient services, and creating a community of supporters and volunteers like you who will stop at nothing to create a world in which all pancreatic cancer patients will thrive. You can help support our important mission by donating today at pancan.org. Thanks for your time.
We now return to Trek Untold.
So, Richard, let me ask you something that's pretty much a fan favorite for me, one of my favorite shows on TV that you did, and that's Golden Girls. You did an episode called Never Yell Fire in a Crowded Retirement Home.
Yes.
And you're pretty much in the beginning. It's a two-parter. You're in the beginning of that first episode, which is ultimately, it's a two-part clip show, basically. But, I love
Right.
Golden Girls. What do you remember about working with those ladies?
They're amazing. The four of them were just absolutely incredible, and they're and totally at the top of their game. Four very different personalities, and that's why I'm sure why it worked so well. But again, these were people that were so willing to share, any moment. I was a guest that's just brought on to as a setup, essentially. The police officer that's questioning, that's questioning them, and they made it so easy and so much fun to be part of it. I mean, they're great. I mean, it's sad that that all except Betty are gone now, I guess.
And that episode you also shared with Stanley Camel. He was another Star Trek alumni.
Yes.
Did you have any time to chat with him in that show or any other shows?
Oh yeah, I actually did a couple of shows with Stanley, and it was always fun to catch up with him. What had been going on, between the last time we'd run into each other on a set.
There's a Star Trek, essentially it's a Star Trek Wikipedia called Memory Alpha, and it lists all the different things that folks have done with other Star Trek actors, and yours is absurdly long, of course, with all the different interactions you've had. But yeah, since you did mention Bob Gunton, actually, he's someone who I'd love to talk to in this show one day, and I'd love to hear any stories you have about Bob.
Well, the first time I worked with Bob was on a play called Phaedra Britannica, and we did it up at Chautauqua in New York during their summer program there. We were the theater that was in residence at the time, and then we did it again in New York at our theater, the CSC. And Bob was always great to work with, and he's such a knowledgeable person as well as actor, and he's got such an incredible range of experience. Plus, there's all that musical side. I remember the first time I saw him in a play after we had worked together was when he did Sweeney Todd at the Circle and the Square, and and he's amazing. He did Perone in Evita, and and for that matter, we never met on the set, but he had a whole sequence in Glory that I think most of it got cut. He was a plantation owner, I believe. But he's a great person. He was like one of the last actors I saw before if things got shut down here. We were both auditioning for a role in a pilot in the beginning of first week of March, I think.
So another show that I really love to talk about here on Trek Untold, not Star Trek related, clearly, is Murder, She Wrote. I love hearing about Angela Lansbury stories, and you did a bunch of Murder, She Wrote, including one of the movies, South by Southwest.
Yeah.
So, I'd love to just pinpoint each and every episode, but let's just say overall memories of being on the show and especially working with and being around Angela Lansbury.
Well, again, she's incredible, and by the time I worked with her, she was also producing it, and she had her fingers in every part of it, and it was amazing how she maintained it. She was always high energy, and she always right there, and part of the process, and it was great. And incredibly loyal. I remember one of the episodes I did was the Irish episode, and she would do an Irish episode every year so that she could work again with one of her Sweeney Todds. I forget his name. It's terrible. She did one with Len every year, and she did one with anyway. And he was marvelous as well. And but yeah, and it was always like a family. I mean, she knew everybody and knew all about everybody on the set, both in front of and behind the camera. And she was so genuine and so generous all the time. And so when I got the call about South by Southwest, I was just flabbergasted. I thought this is great. I'd love to do this, and we just had we had a marvelous time shooting that. It was amazing. I mean, the episodes were fun, but doing the TV movie was just a blast.
Yeah, I've never heard anybody say a bad word about Angela ever, or ever say they had a bad experience on anything Murder, She Wrote. But especially doing the movie, I mean, since you had already done at that point 2 episodes of the series, what was different about the movie? Was there a different kind of a feel on the set or anything like that?
Well, there was more time. There was a bigger story to tell. There were more locations and more people involved. It was shot like a TV movie was in those days, where you had almost a month to put together. I mean, we spent, of course, time on the train. We went to different locations to make it look like we were going all over the Southwest. And it was, and then the I always loved the denouements, the reveals at the end, how Angela's character Mrs. Fletcher has figured everything out and is putting it together for all us poor people who don't know who the murderers are, and we work so hard to make ourselves not seem villainous, and so I hopefully when she revealed us, it was a surprise to the audience.
So we got a lot of Scoobies listening on Trek Untold too, and you were in an episode of the Buffy the Vampire Slayer TV show, and you played Merrick. You were replacing Donald Sutherland. That was the character he had played in the motion picture. What can you tell us about being in Buffy the Vampire Slayer? That's got to be a fun one too.
It was a fun one, and Joss was directing it, and so that made it even more exciting. And I had been watching it in bits and pieces. I couldn't follow every episode, but I would catch whenever I would whenever I could, because I really enjoyed the storytelling, and it was exciting to be able to play that Donald Sutherland character, to sort of tell that little bit of the origin story. I think it was the end of the first episode, first season. But anyway, that was so amazing, and even by then, whenever we left the lot, it's on location. It was very difficult because there were so many people that that wanted to see what was going on, that wanted to find out what was happening, and again, that was Justin put together such a wonderful group of people, both in front of him and behind the camera, that it was everything was fun. It was the tough thing was flipping from night to day in the shooting, because we had a bunch of night scenes, and then we had to do the scene at the high school in the day, and that was somehow it's always harder to switch your biological clock around, especially in the short period of time you have when you're shooting an episode.
Yeah, I'm surprised that they didn't have Merrick come back for more flashbacks as well throughout the series. Was there ever any discussion of that character returning?
There was some discussion, but they had evidently had decided that they didn't. They were strong enough with her guide now, and they didn't want to. I don't think they wanted to do any more flashbacks to Merrick, because they were more interested in following the I think the story that was moving ahead. I have to tell you, I was incredibly excited when the graphic novel came out, and saw that that Merrick had made the graphic novel.
That's right. So you got a comic page with yourself on it.
Yeah, exactly.
So, Richard, I've got a question that's, basically unrelated to anything today. And I know we're kind of jumping around a lot. But that's just because you've just done so much in your prolific career. But I read this great story you had about an interaction with Steven Seagal. And I love hearing anything about Steven Seagal. Do you remember that story?
Probably, yeah. I was the Dalai Lama was doing a fundraiser at the Beverly Hills Hotel, and my ex-girlfriend was running it. She was her father was a mountain climber, had climbed Everest, and they had lived in Nepal for a while, and so she called me up, and she said, "Look, we need someone to stand in front of the elevator going up to the second floor, and just let people in that will that have an invitation, and we need someone that that physically is imposing enough, but also is somewhat recognizable. And would you be willing to do that?" I said, "Sure." So I'm there, and the first people to come up, of course, are Harrison Ford and his then wife, who were both on the board, and so and it was the slowest elevator in the world. I had to stand there forever, waiting for the elevator to come, and kind of, and so I let him up, and then Steven Seagal came up, and several other people. Well, evidently, he got upstairs, and he thought he was going up to a private audience with the Dalai Lama, and it was not. That was not the case. It was all of the people that were the high donors, essentially, and they were going to meet. It was meet and greet. Dalai Lama was going to say hello, hi, hello, and they were, some short conversation, and the next person, and I guess he got quite upset about it, and then my ex-girlfriend is like 4'11", and she sort of said, "No, this is the situation, essentially take it or leave it," and he said, "Well, then I have to change my dashiki," and so he had to come back down and get out of his yellow one and put on a green one. I have no idea what it meant, but I thought it was so funny that she could tell him what to do. It was pretty good.
It's like one of the best Hollywood stories I've heard. It's like Steven Seagal, Richard Riehle, and the Dalai Lama walk into a bar together. It's got to make such a good story.
Yeah, that's about as far. That's a good lead-in. Let's try that next time.
And speaking of Harrison too, you were also in The Fugitive with him. You're in a pretty iconic scene from that film too, when he escapes from the bus.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, do you remember a lot? That scene also has Danny Trejo as well. Do you remember much about doing that part of the movie?
Well, yeah, we were in North Carolina, this guy owned a private railroad that went from Asheville to the reservation there, and he allowed them to dig a little spur so that train actually would go off would go off the regular track into this pile of dirt that they had done there, and we were shooting nights, and it was cold. In fact, we lost one night because it snowed, and it was very interesting because that was the shift also between Harrison and Tommy Lee Jones, and so Harrison had one of his provisos that in doing the film is that he didn't want to keep shifting back and forth in makeup and things, and so he said. And so he asked the director, "Is there any way that we can shoot this, straight, without going back and forth?" And Andy looked at it, and Andy Davis, director, looked at it, and he says, "Yeah, you never go back to another to a location been before. So yeah, let's do it like that. We'll shoot it directly." And so we were doing that, and they had. This was the first big stunt. That was the other thing. Andy didn't want to do anything. He didn't want to fake anything. They didn't have CGI then, but he didn't want to, do. And so they actually rolled. We weren't in it, thank God. They actually rolled the bus down onto the track, but it got caught in the trees. So they had to get it back up again and roll another bus down, and it landed enough on the track they could use it. Then it was a mess. It was all mashed in, and you had to kind of crawl in. And Harrison was there at first person in, crawling into the bus. He was whether he was on camera or behind camera, he was absolutely there every moment. And then they would drive you. They would run the train right up to the bus while we were doing the scene, and we could see the light from the engine as it was coming, and then we would do the scene, and then those of us that got to jump out jumped out, and Harrison had to wait the last minute to help the wounded guard out, and then when they actually hit the train again, it was all done live, or the train hit the bus. It was all done live, and they had a stunt guy that actually jumped off the bus just as the train hit, and they had 16 cameras going, and it was amazing, and then Harrison did his runaway, and he really because he was in leg chains, he really hurt his leg then, and we had the rest of the movie to shoot, and he just manned. I mean, he was amazing that they got through all of that. But then the next night we had Tommy Lee coming in, and where Harrison was always there, but he's very quiet. Tommy was involving everybody in every moment of the process. And that was a big change, and that was kind of fun. And yeah, it was an amazing experience to be part of it, and it was all the Andy wanted to do everything real, and that was exciting as well.
It sounds like a very interesting dichotomy between the two leads. You've got one who's just very outgoing, one who's a little bit more introverted. It sounds like really perfect casting.
Yeah, it was. It was incredible.
So you were also on an episode of Boston Legal, and that show, of course, has several Star Trek alums as the main cast and many other Trek alumni throughout the series. Now, I know you didn't do any scenes with him, but I'm curious if you had any interactions with William Shatner.
Not directly. We kept passing each other because he would come out of shooting his scene as I was going in to do mine, but we never had more than a casual nod and hi, how's it going, and how did your scene go, and that sort of stuff.
Did you get to have any time with Renee Auberjonois?
I'd known Renee before from ACT in San Francisco, but I didn't get a chance to spend any time with him. I don't think he was actually even on the set the days I was.
Yeah, I just watched back that episode. I think he might have been on that one briefly, but if he was, it was very, very short. So, I wasn't too sure. So growing up, one of my favorite sitcoms was Grounded for Life. And I was a big fan of that show. I love that show. I'm sad that it's like so hard to find. I mean, luckily it's on Amazon Prime these days, but I'm sad it's not on TV as much. But it's 5 seasons long. You are Grandpa Walt Finnerty. What do you remember about being on that show? What a fun show it must have been.
It was a terrific show to be part of. They had pitched it to Donald and to Kevin as they were going to do they planned to shoot a little half-hour movie each week. And at the beginning, that's exactly what it was. But between Fox and then it being dropped and picked up by the WB, each time it moved, there was less and less of a film and more of a sitcom. Originally, we were shooting. Everything was being shot. Single camera, but between the first pilot, they shot a first pilot with Stephen Root playing Walt, but he was not available when the show got picked up, and so that's how I got a chance to do it, between when they shot the first pilot and when they shot the second pilot, they had decided they were going to do 3 days of single camera, and then they were going to do this sort of 2-day audience live thing, and so it made for very long weeks, but it was fun to have both the single camera and the audience, because you could do many more things with the single camera than you could live in front of an audience. And then when the WB took over, they decided to go essentially all audience. We do a 4-day week for the audience and have 1 day where we could do some location stuff. And but it was they had really cast such a wonderful group of people, and we had some great writers and directors. All through the 5 seasons, and the stories were fun. I mean, Bill and Mike, were kind of originated it and came up with the idea, but each of the writers had their own stories, growing up stories that they wanted to tell, and that was one of my. I figured I'd have done like 15 Santa Clauses, so that was one of my Santa Clauses. And it was fun because it was fun and kind of crazy because Jake was kind of right between whether he really believed in Santa Claus or didn't at that time. So we were trying to be very careful about how we presented it, and then we have the Santa Claus fight where Donald and I actually get into a fight with each other, and then there's the throwing the tomato and hitting Santa during the Santa Claus parade. That was a fun episode to do.
Yeah, and let me tell you, I had such a crush on Lindsay Bartleson back then, and I'm pretty sure I still do.
Oh. Yeah, no, Lindsay was great. What a terrific actress. I mean, she's an amazing actress, and she had an incredible resume, even going into that. And she was so funny and so perfect for that role. Yeah, she's just great.
It's such a strong cast. There's a lot of really good episodes. Like, just having watched some back on Amazon Prime again, I'm like, wow, I really miss this show. It seemed like it really felt like an actual family between you guys. Like, it really felt like there was something real going on there, and that made for good TV.
Well, yeah, I think there was that sense of it. We really got to know each other and spending a lot of time together. Especially, like I said, in the first season, we were there, and it was a mid-season show, so it was kind of, everything was kind of messy in terms of putting it together, and so we ended up spending a lot of time together on the lot, and that was great fun, and Carsey Werner was always very good about supporting their various shows and the people in them, and it was and it was from the in terms of the cast. I mean, Donald was trying to bring everybody in. Kevin in his own strange way was definitely part of the process. Megan was just a sweetheart, and then the kids were great. I mean, they were incredible. We spent so much time with them. It was like we were their parents and grandparents.
And for any listeners who are still listening to this episode and still do not recognize Richard Riehle, well, I think it's about time we give you guys the one you know him best for, because Richard is a true people person, because he was in Office Space. He already knows where I'm going. He was in Office Space, Thomas Mikowski. Wow, that's... I mean, I'm wondering what you get recognized most for. I feel like it's probably Office Space, isn't it?
Yeah. It was very funny. I was in during the hiatus from after the first season of Grounded for Life. I went back to New York and did a play. And when you're in Manhattan, you're on the street all the time, or on the subway or whatever. And even though people are sort of circumspect about making any demands upon you if they recognize you, you still are aware that people are have seen you and think they know you or whatever. So for a week I did a very unscientific survey, and I didn't approach people, but I would listen very carefully to what they said, and it was about, I think it was about 70% was Grounded for Life, and then there was 20% was whatever was on late night cable that week, and then another 10% were people that were thought that I was had been their teacher in sixth grade, or was I worked at a grocery store or something that they went too often, but it was Grounded for Life has always been and even now a lot of times people are still recognize me from Grounded for Life. As for 20 years now, 21 years.
Yeah, I was surprised to see how long ago it was, and I still remember it. But it's such a good show. But yeah, I want to ask a little bit more about Office Space, in particular working with Mike Judge, because I love a lot of his animated shows in particular. But what's it like being directed by him live action?
Oh, Mike was great. He was so funny. He spent a long time casting it. I think I was in like three or four times. The first time I went in, I read both for the psychiatrist and for Thomas Mikowski, and then the following times it was just Tom. And and he would have new things that he would want to try out each succeeding audition, and then when he finally had put the cast together that he wanted, he got in touch with everybody. He said, "We're going to go to Austin. It's my hometown. We're not going to have people, looking over our shoulders and seeing what we do, but we're going to work hard. And when we have time off, I'll take you to the bars where my band used to play. I'll take you to some of the best places to eat in Austin. We're going to have a great time." Man, we did. He couldn't have been, a more amazing host. And then in terms of directing, he was great, because he was very open in terms of allowing people to explore things. I remember when the first I was the first guy doing the two Bob scene, and so I came in and we rehearsed the Bob scene as it was written, and then these two guys were improvisers from way back, so they said, well, can we try some things? And Mike said, well, sure, go ahead. And so for about half an hour they were just riffing on all sorts of stuff, and it was hilarious. It was all I could do to keep from laughing. And then Mike said, okay, that's great. He says, now let's do it like we wrote it. And that's we ended up doing what was written, but that the kind of freedom that had evolved during the course of exploring it that way really, I think, added to the scene. And it was like that all the way through. He was again, the opening sequence where, well, it's not the opening sequence. The opening sequence is the cars, which is hilarious itself. But the sequence where we're going through the hedge and up and down that little gully, and then to Initech, and we shot that in 5 different places, and including when Ajay comes across the parking lot. We shot that in Dallas. I spent 1 day in Dallas because Mike there was an unfinished overpass that he wanted to have in the background of a shot, and so we figured out what other things he could shoot there, and that was one of them. So Ajay comes across the parking lot in Dallas, and then we're walking down a sidewalk next to a hedge somewhere in Austin. Then we're in a different place so we can go through the hedge, and then we're in a different place doing the up and down, and then finally we get to Enitech. And it's always so much fun to kind of because it would be up to Mike to kind of figure out how this was all going to fit together. And the other thing which was great is that he did his flare stuff right away on the second day when he did his cameo. So we all had a sense of just how far he wanted to go with things. I mean, he was very good at that because we could see what he was trying to get with the film and with the characters, and it was really helpful to be able to watch him do that. He's amazing. He has such incredible talent, and he's a great guy. He couldn't be a nicer guy.
It's critical for any set that you're on that you know what the director wants, that the director is clear and concise with what he's trying to get out of his team. And it sounds like Mike Judge was a really great example of that, of a really good director. Have you had to work with any other directors that were a little bit more difficult? And you don't have to name names if you don't want to, but usually I ask this question a little bit later on. But what do you think would have been your best day on a set, and maybe your worst day on a set?
That's a good question. I had never thought of that. I'll go back a bit and answer a little bit about the directors, because directors have a whole gamut in which they work. Some of them are totally technical, and they leave you completely alone. They figure if they've cast you, that's what they want, and sometimes it's a little disconcerting because you may not be sure why they cast you, but they they're just looking at the technical side of it, and it comes out great in the end. Any director that continues to work comes out with a final project that's great, however they get to it. And then there's some directors that are very much like working with the actors and finding and discovering things in a rehearsal process. But again, that's time is so much of the essence in shooting anything like this. It's very hard to have a rehearsal process. I think I'll go ahead, and I think one of the best days or one of the best experiences on the set was in Of Mice and Men, because Gary and John had done the play and knew it backward and forward. Gary had worked with Horton Foote on doing the adaptation, and then they had put together quite an incredible cast of actors to play it, and they had a very strong point of view. It was so to show how strange it is for these two guys to have stuck together for so long, whereas almost everybody else is a solo act essentially. You know, all of these workers, they have their own backstory, and they tried to add, you know, they little bits and pieces so you understood why they were what they were like, and but George and Lenny are this pair that hang together, and that's very unusual. And so we had a week of rehearsal. They had worked into the 13-week shoot where we rehearsed the whole screenplay as if it were a play, and we could have done it by the end of that week essentially as a play. Everybody was so much into it, so that when we went to the different locations to shoot it, it was a very comfortable feel, you know, that we knew exactly what who everybody was and why they were there and what the situation was, and I thought it turned out to be quite an incredible film, and it was a wonderful experience shooting it.
Do you remember any really, really horrible, no good, terrible days on sets?
Most of them have to do with just how uncomfortable it was. Whether it was raining. I remember there was it rained all through the day and into the night when we were shooting. When I was shooting my one scene in Lethal Weapon 4, and we couldn't. There was so much sort of extraneous stuff involved. There were 150 extras. There were 50 emergency vehicles. There were 2 cigar boats. There was a helicopter. There was it was just cold and wet and then there was this little forehand scene that was going on in front of all this. So they would say, background action, and then action, and you knew that if you messed up, that it would take like 20 minutes to half an hour to reset. And so there was a lot of tension on it. But Dick Donner made it just so comfortable, and everybody was on top of their game, and were nice people as well. I mean, Mel and Danny and Chris Rock, and it was just terrific being there. But it was cold and miserable and wet. Iron Will was another one. There was a funeral scene, and it was absolutely freezing cold. Plus, we were in these period costumes, and you kept slipping on the snow because there weren't any treads on. It was these leather soled shoes, and that was the first day of shooting on that. Actually, it was minus 40 degrees, and the camera froze. And so there's they needed 4 hours to get things set up again before they could continue shooting.
Oh wow! So we've gone this far without talking about your other 2 Star Trek appearances. So I think we better jump into that. Let's start with Star Trek Voyager. You were in season 6, and you are Seamus from Fairhaven and Spirit Folk, which is again much like the Inner Light, a very different type of Star Trek set. So what did you think about being Seamus and this Irish world of Fairhaven?
I love the world, and we had such a good time there. I mean, whether it was having a cow in the church, or running around this little village that they had created for us, and everybody was. It was delightful, and they had when we came in to talk about doing it, they were, the sense was that that they wanted Janeway to have a love interest, even if it was a holodeck love interest. And so they brought this wonderful Irish actor, Fintan, to come and play that character, and he was marvelous. And so there was some discussion about, you know, coming back to that holodeck, you know, as in the following season, because these two episodes were shot toward the end of I can't remember what season it was, but and so that was exciting as well, to think that we'd be able to come back there. Ian Abercrombie and I were kind of the two goofy Irishmen but we got to play with everybody. I mean, I got to show 7 and 9 how to shoot darts in a pub, and the doctor, and it was wonderful to be part of that, to kind of go as they came into our world, and to kind of involve them in our lives. But then, over the summer, they decided that they were going to go much more serious toward the end of end of their run, and so that holodeck disappeared, unfortunately.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned working with Ian Abercrombie, because you did Public Eye with him as well, I believe, right?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, you guys just have great rapport on screen. I just like when you guys show up together in Spirit Folk. It's just like so much fun watching you guys just play with each other.
We had such a good time. I can't begin to tell you what a blast it was being on that in that life, in that world. Yeah.
Now, how close together were these two episodes filmed? Because on TV, I think they aired about 6 weeks apart. Were these basically filmed like back to back?
No, it was. I think it was about a month between when we shot them. Yeah.
And so you spent a lot of time too with Robert Duncan McNeill as Tom Paris. Typically, you're asking him for shillings. How'd you like working with him?
He was great. That was so much fun. Yeah. Always looking for a little cash. That's that was the Irish cliche that we couldn't. I don't think we could have done any more cliche Irishmen than we did.
Now, I know with Star Trek shows, typically there are no rehearsals, and in particular the 2 Fairhaven episodes, there is, I feel like, some more complicated shots, especially when you've got so many of those like large group shots. And I'm thinking, in fact, of the scene where Tom Paris has the car, or just other shots throughout the town where there's a lot going on. All the characters are walking around Fairhaven. So do you recall anything about just basically having to do those kinds of shots and essentially the lack of rehearsals for more complicated types of shots?
They had a great AD group that really, cued us, and took us through what the action was going to be, showed us where the camera was going to go, so that when they shot it, we knew where we had to be, and then it was up to us to make it work. But it was in a way. The car was less difficult than the cow, because the cow didn't want to play at all.
Of course, that cow will never work in this town again.
I'm afraid not, but it was a good cow.
Did you get a chance to interact with any of the main cast offset? Like, I imagine someone like Kate Mulgrew, you would get along great with her. Well,
as a matter of fact, I knew her quite well, and we talked quite a bit during the course of shooting those episodes. We had worked together up in Seattle doing theater, and so it was really nice to kind of catch up with her, because her story going into Voyager is just amazing, but I was not at all surprised that she was that she was able to kind of pick it up and move on with this with so little prep time.
Now, we had to talk about your Star Trek Enterprise appearance as well, but I think before we talk about that, there is one other sort of Star Trek reference related to Enterprise, and that's you did 2 episodes of Quantum Leap with Scott Bakula too, right?
Scott, right? Yeah, those are some of the first jobs I did in Los Angeles. Yeah, and so that was fun. It was funny because I got to I came out here. I'd never spent any time in Los Angeles at all, and so I came out right after Glory and was doing the audition stuff, and got cast in Ferris Bueller. And then I got a call from the head of the Los Angeles agency saying, I just wanted congratulations on the Ferris Bueller, and I'll be here if you need anything, but I'm furloughing the office because only you and Scott got pilots, and so for the summer, I'm kind of just manning the phones myself. There's not going to be any of the regular agents available, and then we'll see how things turn out later on, and when they start shooting the episodes. So I had met Scott when I first came out to LA at the agency, and so it was interesting that his Quantum Leap and my Ferris were the only shows that the agency had gotten to that pilot season. I had run into him again in New York when he was doing theater out there at various places, and so I kind of knew him, and then doing the episodes of Quantum Leap was a blast. I had so much fun on both of them because I loved the premise of it, and I loved working on them, and so when I ran into him again on Enterprise, it was like we had just worked together, even though it had been probably 20 years. But it was Enterprise was great, and John Billingsley, who played Phlox in that, it was an old friend from Seattle as well. So that was nice to kind of get a chance to do some stuff with him as well.
Had you performed on stage with I was going to call him Phlox with with John before as well?
No, actually we hadn't. So surprisingly enough, we had both been there at the same time and working at different theaters, and so I saw his work, and I imagine he saw mine, but we never had done any stage work together.
And the episode of Enterprise we're talking about, by the way, it's Cold Station 12 and part of the Augments, both from season 4, and you're playing Dr. Lucas. And so, I feel like your other two appearances in the Star Trek franchise, you got to dodge a lot of the technobabble. This time around, you had a little bit to deal with.
Oh, yes, I did. Yes, indeed. And that's always a frightening aspect of it. I mean, like doing a doctor in ER or something. I mean, even if you knew, even if you in your have figured out exactly what everything means, it's just hard to flow trippingly off the tongue, as they say. But yeah, that was exciting, and being a hostage and being tortured and yet having been Phlox's mentor, which was fun as well. Both of those episodes were great, and working with the whole Augment story is such a great story as well. That was what I loved about Enterprise was you getting the kind of stepping back and seeing how what these various important stories in the franchise had been like, how they had developed early on. Yeah.
I just like that you said it was exciting being tortured. I'm going to quote you on that. So you got to work a lot in this episode with Brent Spiner too, which he's playing there.
Yes.
How'd you like playing off of Brent?
He was wonderful. Yeah, I'd met him, of course, when I did the Inner Light. Although we hadn't worked together, we would often be in the makeup trailer at the same time because he had extensive makeup to get as Data, and he would be singing show tunes and telling stories. He's great to be on set with. He really is. And even when he's doing an evil genius like in the Augments, there's still that glint in his eye.
You spend most of this episode essentially being beat up and covered in bruises and blood. It's pretty much the most prosthetics you've worn in all your Star Trek appearances. Was this the most prosthetics you'd worn in general through your career?
No, I'm trying to think. I have had. They actually had put so much blood and stuff on me in fugitive that that when they saw it, they had to take some of it off. But that was that was just blood stuff. I'm trying to think if I've worn prosthetics. I've worn beards, lots of beards, and wigs and things, but I don't think I ever I've had much in the way of prosthetic. I don't know why. I guess they decide that they don't want to hide my good looks or something. I haven't figured that out yet.
Now, especially talking about this episode of Enterprise, did any of that makeup, especially because you are wearing some little cuts and things like that, was any of that distracting for you? Did it kind of get in the way of your performance, or was it just not a big deal?
No, once they finish doing the makeup for you, you take a good look at yourself in the mirror, and so you know what you look like, and how you should and how you should play that, and then also you know where you can't touch, because you don't want to ruin what they've done.
Right.
But then yes, you don't, other than knowing, oh my God, I got beat up here pretty bad, so I'll have to just kind of make sure that I that hurt comes through somehow.
So in the Star Trek franchise, you've played 3 very different roles, 3 different shows entirely. Which would you say is the maybe character or the episode, if they're different, that's fine too, character episode that you are most proud of?
Oh golly, well I do think that Batai is just such a wonderful, warm character, and he had to be because that is sort of Patrick's icon in a way. He names his son Batai. Batai comes back. His spirit comes back toward the end when he's getting ready to send off the message to the world about the end of this civilization, and that that was I really enjoyed being part of that story. I had such a great time in the Irish holodeck. It's hard not to include that. I mean, I look forward to every day coming to work and seeing, and being part of that, and there's again being going back to the origin story in Enterprise. It's really exciting. It's to bring it up. I mean, they're all, like you say, so different. That was nice too. I mean, we weren't just playing the same character, even type of character, from one to the other.
You've been in this industry for quite some time. You've worked with so many amazing people, been in so many different amazing shows and films. I mean, if I read them all on air right now, I'm pretty sure that COVID's going to be extinct by then.
Let's hope so.
Yes. But, of all the people you've worked with, actors, directors, anybody else on stage or off, theater, film, whatever, who has left the biggest impression on you and perhaps given you something you've always held on to with either your career or your personal life? Just something that's always someone who touched you in a way that's been very important to Richard Riehle.
The nice thing about doing this business is that in the end, it's a sort of a small family, and there are people that you end up working with over and over again. Not necessarily by choice, but when it is when it is someone, then that becomes even more even better. There's an actor, Michael Ironside, who I met doing Free Willy, and we were sort of the villains in Free Willy, and because of that I was his henchman, so I did the dirty work, and he sort of he plotted what was going to go on, and we spent a great deal of time together on location. For first, I think we were 6 weeks in Mexico City, and then we were 2 weeks in Seattle, and another 4 or 5 weeks in Anacortes, Oregon, and we and it was great. We got to know each other. There was a great rapport set up, and then he would keep in touch with me, and so And so he would say, I'm doing this film in Canada. Would you be, tell your agent to contact so and so, and so through the course of the years, we've ended up doing, I don't know, 6 or 8 films together, and
Wow.
and they've all been wonderful experiences. And it's been on, since Free Willy, which was, which we were not, he wasn't responsible for. He's been mainly responsible for getting me into those films, and that's very exciting. Danny Trejo, I worked with on probably 6 or 8 films, and it's always a joy to come on the set and see him. And also Brian Cox. We did this little film called Red, and realized while we were doing it that this was like the 5th or 6th film we had been in together. And that's really, I really like that part of it an awful lot. And it makes it makes the work easier because you already have that sort of rapport. I mean, even Casino. I got into Casino because of Joe.
Wow.
And we had just finished doing Public Eye, and they needed somebody at the last minute for Banker Clark, and he put in a good word for me.
Now, as we wrap up this interview, I can't let you out of here today without discussing just one last role that's a personal favorite of mine, and that's from The Legend of Korra. And you voiced Boomy, who's Aang's oldest son. I didn't know you voiced Boomy until I was looking on your resume, and all of a sudden Avatar pops up, and I just freak out. So, I'd love to hear if you have any memories of that. Like, did you get to record with the other cast members of the show, or were you kind of solo in a voice booth on your own?
No, that was very exciting. I had done not a lot of voice stuff, but everything I had done before, you were by yourself. I mean, I remember doing Home on the Range, the Disney film, and coming in and for about four hours one day and laying down all the lines, all the tracks for the sheriff. And so when I finished, I said, so when's this coming out? They said, about 5 years, and you'll be back in about every 6 months to do something. And sure enough, and I remember like the third time I came in, there was this guy. They tape it all, at least Disney does now. Videotape it so that they can use your facial features. But there was this guy watching, and after we finished doing the taping session, they brought him into the booth, and they said, "This is the person who is going to be your he's your artist. He's creating your character, and he wanted to watch you shoot this." So up until then, all my experience had been solo stuff. For Legend of Korra, they tried as much as possible to get as many of the cast as possible into the booth. Now, you couldn't look at the person that you were working with because you had to always be facing your mic all the time. But just having their presence there meant a whole was a whole different thing. And plus, the sort of the rhythm of doing a scene with several people. So I got to read with just about everybody in the cast at one point or another. And then unfortunately there were people were off doing other things, and so they'd be taping. They would have to tape, and so some days there were just a few of us, and some days there was a whole crowd. But it was great. It was a real good bunch of people.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds really, really exciting, and I'm happy you got to do a lot of scenes with J.K. Simmons, too. Like, I wish J.K. had done Star Trek so I can have an excuse to interview him, but sadly he hasn't yet. But, yeah, I don't know if you remember, the last season of Legend of Korra, that came out the same year that J.K. won the Academy Award for Whiplash.
Yeah, absolutely. And J.K. was funny. I will tell you this story. When the first time that we had, that we were doing a scene together in Korra, I said, J.K., I got to tell you, I have, I really have loved watching your work over the years, blah, blah, blah. He says, "You don't remember, do you?" So what do you mean? He said, "We met in Seattle." I said, "Really?" He says, "Yeah, I had just come to Seattle, and you were doing this play called Through the Leaves." I at the empty space, and so I was there to see the show and to get to know some of the actors in town, and you had this scene about halfway through where you're taking a bath on stage, and then you stand up and gave me a full shot. He said it's seared in my brain. I can't get it out of my head, and I said, I'm sorry. He said no. He said but yeah, and we worked in different theaters in Seattle for about a year, and then you left, and but he said yeah, so we know each other sort of. I said okay, I'm glad to hear that.
So, Richard, you've got a bunch of things planned for 2021 here. So, and I'm sure by now some of these things are going to be already available. So, what is coming out this year for you?
Well, okay. There's a couple of films that are sort of working their way. They're on different platforms, but and you can kind of find them. But hopefully they'll have a larger distribution this year. One is Limbo, which is a really interesting film. It's about a trial for somebody's soul, and I play the court reporter, and that was really fun. We had a great time doing that. And there's some amazing people in that.
You've got some devil horns in that too, don't you?
I wear devil horns in that. Yes, I do. Yeah, that was actually probably the most prosthetic I've had on. And then there's a movie called Faith Based, which was shot by the people I did Fear Inc. with, and it's about two slackers who decide they're going to make some money by shooting a faith-based movie, and of course they run into all sorts of problems. Again, it's an amazing cast, and I think it's a very funny film. It had one screening at the Santa Barbara Film Festival, which I wasn't able to see, so I still haven't seen it yet, but I'm looking forward to it. And then there's the other films that are coming out. There's one called Destination Marfa, which I think they just got distribution on, and that's with Tony Todd and Stelio Savante, and it's about this real town in southwest Texas that is it's sort of a fake town. They've created this I don't know location, and it's got and it's where they originally shot Giant. So there's a lot of James Dean and Elizabeth Taylor stuff around there too. But it's about these four kids that are on a road trip, and they find themselves in Marfa, and only to discover that it's not everything that they thought it was, or that it's more than what they thought it was. And then Moon Manor, which is about a guy who's got Alzheimer's, and he wants to have his funeral while he still remembers everything. And his brother is a preacher. I play the brother, and who's trying to stop him because he's afraid that once the funeral is over, he's going to commit suicide. And then there's one called Fuzzy Head, about I play a sheriff in that, and it's about a girl who may or may not have been involved in a murder, but she can't remember anything, and that's the Fuzzy Head part. And there were all stuff that was done in 2019 and very early in 2020, and hopefully they'll be able to come out in 2021.
Yeah, sounds like a lot of very, very interesting stuff. I'm looking forward to checking out some of those things, especially Destination Marfa, because you got Tony Todd right there, another
Tony
Trek
Todd,
alumni.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, sounds like some great stuff. So looking forward to seeing those things. So you've been in this career for decades now, and you've been, like you said, throughout the show again and again, over 400 different productions, not counting theater work as well. What do you think is going to be the legacy of Richard Riehle?
Oh, golly. Probably, a good journeyman character actor that you can plug in, anywhere and get a a good substantial performance. Whether it's somebody who's scary or nice or is just or is introducing people into a new world. I like the idea that I'm somebody that can keep working because people trust me, with their material.
All right, so Richard, last question for this interview. What is the best thing about being a part of the Star Trek universe?
I think the best thing about being part of the Star Trek universe is that you belong to this incredible family, and you can recognize so many people that you've worked with over the years, and you have that that commonality, that thing that has been so important for your life and for your career, and then as well, people do recognize you from Star Trek. It's on all the time. In fact, it has their own network essentially. That's where you can watch all the episodes, and that's exciting too. It's a great thing to turn on at any point and get involved in whatever the story is.
All right, excellent. So, Richard, thank you so much today for chatting with us, giving us all your time. And, when we talk about character actors, we're talking about the real working backbone of Hollywood, of the backbone of this industry. And if you look up character actor in the dictionary, we're going to see your photo next to it because you've left us with quite a resume, quite a legacy. And, without folks like yourself, those stars aren't going to have anybody to help pick them up. I mean, someone like Richard Riehle is responsible for making those folks look good. So, you've done some amazing performances, and I look forward to seeing a lot more of your work in 2020, 2021, 2040, 2080. Hey, let's go into the next millennium while we're at it too. So I want more Richard Riehle, and everybody out there, go ahead, watch Grounded for Life on Amazon Prime. Let's get Richard some royalty checks from Grounded for Life, please. Let's make it happen.
Thank you, Matthew. It's been wonderful. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you, Richard. Have a great day. Live long and prosper.
Yes, sir. You too.
And that was our chat with Richard Riehle, an excellent storyteller and a man who loves what he does. It's crazy to think how far just saying yes to things has served his career, and it's a testament to the fact that being an actor doesn't just mean being the lead all the time. It means being a team player and making the most of everything that comes your way. I'm sure that one day a new listener who's going to check out this show a few years after it was initially released will go and take a look at Richard's IMDb page, and, well, they shouldn't be surprised if the number of his appearances that he's had has gone over 500. And I certainly look forward to seeing him pop up again in more things the next time I turn on my TV. The TNG episode Inner Light went through many changes before it landed on TV sets on June 1st, 1992. The story was conceptualized by Michael Piller, who wanted Picard to play out a life that wasn't his, but no effective story could be found to make that idea work. It wasn't until Morgan Gendel came along with the idea of having a probe that would beam a sort of alternate life into the character's head that things began to really come together, but even then, the original episode was more of an anti-war story with roots in true tales from Holocaust survivors. As that initial story took shape, it was more about a group of Nazi-like militants who created an advanced society off the backs of a group of people that they deemed inferior. But as time went on, the story focused more on Picard. And there was even a brief discussion of having Riker be a part of the alternate life too, but that was ultimately nixed to keep it centralized on the captain. And if you're wondering why the episode was titled Inner Light, well, it turns out that it's an in-joke from Morgan, who said that he wanted all of his TNG episodes to be the title of obscure Beatles songs. The only other episode to have this distinction would be Starship Mine, which was originally intended to be titled Revolution. So that wraps up this week's episode of Trek Untold. Thank you so much for checking it out this week. Please make sure that you're following us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, all at Trek Untold. That's one word, no spaces, at Trek Untold. It's the best way to get updates on guests, check out all the memes and other things that we're posting, and interact with myself and other Star Trek fans. If you'd like to support this podcast, go ahead and check out patreon.com/TrekUntold and become a subscriber to the show. Or check out teespring.com/stores/TrekUntold to check out some of our merchandise. If you've been enjoying Trek Untold, please leave us a rating and review on iTunes or wherever you're listening to podcasts. And if you're on YouTube, please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel, youtube.com/nerdnewstoday. Leaving ratings, reviews, and comments are things that all help this podcast grow, and they'll cost you nothing but a few seconds of your time. Doing things like that, or even telling your friends or other Star Trek fans about the stuff you've heard on the show and making sure they know about us, are huge helps to keeping Trek Untold growing. Thank you once again to our sponsor, Triple Fiction Productions. Go ahead and check them out at triple-fictionproductions.net. If you'd like to send us some feedback about this episode, suggest a guest, or ask to be booked on the show, go ahead and send me an email at trekuntold@gmail.com. And of course, thanks to listeners like you for choosing Trek Untold and making it your weekly Star Trek podcast. This has been Trek Untold. I'm Matthew Kaplowitz, and until next time, fortune favors the bold.
Trek Untold is sponsored by TrekSphere.com, promoting fan-produced Star Trek content in all forms, is powered by the RageWorks Podcasting Network, and is affiliated with Nerd News Today.